Mm-hmm.
So that's why we decided that there was only one name that was suitable for him, which was Tenji. So,
Tenzi.
একটু
Yeah,
ডিস্টার্ব
yeah,
করছি
yeah.
স্যার।
I get you. Yeah, yeah.
এবার মনে হয় আমাদের শুরু করার সময় এসেছে। সো
আচ্ছা
আমি
চলো।
মুর্শেদ আলম
133.
তাকে স্টার্ট করতে বলবো।
Mm.
Right. Shomadi, I think we are starting now.
You'll be starting. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
মুর্শেদ আলম দা আপনি আনমিউট করুন নিজেকে।
Welcome all. On behalf of this, I welcome you to today's lecture. This today is our very own Professor Niladri Chatterjee from University of Kalyani.
মুর্শেদ দা আপনার ভিডিওটা অফ করে দিন না, তাহলে ভালো শোনা যাবে।
Yeah, of course. I know you waiting to hear from him. Begin his talk. I would say a few words about this.
মুর্শেদ দা
This
কথাটা
or
শোনা যাচ্ছে না।
social empowerment.
মুর্শেদ দা কিছু শোনা যাচ্ছে না, আপনি ভিডিওটা অফ করে দিন।
Is it okay now? Is it okay now?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, ফাইন।
I'm having network problem here. Okay, so on behalf of BASE, I welcome you all to today's lecture. Our guest today is Professor Niladri Chatterjee from University of Kalyani. I know that you are eagerly waiting to hear from him, but before we begin the lecture, I would like to introduce BASE to you. Few words about BASE. BASE, or Bengali Academia for Social Empowerment, is a developmental organization registered as a trust with the government of West Bengal. It is primarily a collective of academicians, scholars, professionals, and other like-minded people working for community and social development. True to its ideals, BASE is committed to work for the people, and many of its members are actively engaged in social work. During the lockdown and Amphan, BASE opened more than 25 community kitchens all over West Bengal for the poor people, for the migrant laborers, and the helpless street vagabonds. It also distributed tripol, dry foods, medicine, sanitary napkin, and other related items. It has helped many migrant laborers to reach their own states. Recently, BASE has distributed education kits to needy and first generation children. Currently, BASE is engaged in building a network of related people in higher education for information and resource sharing. As you are aware that BASE has been conducting online lectures for the last 2 months. Today we have the BASE online lecture number 52. So you can fairly guess it is consistent organizing the lectures. And our topic of today's lecture is which were against patriarchy. And our speaker is Professor Niladri Chatterjee. I would like to request our participants. I will request them not to their screen during the lecture. If you have any question, please write it down on the chat box. Will take note of it and pass it to our speaker for discussion. Now I would request Shami for Studies Vidyasagar University to introduce and welcome our speaker as well as our chair for the session. Shomyashni, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Murshid Alam. Good evening to one and all present here. On behalf of Bengali Academia for Social Empowerment, I welcome you all to BASE online lecture series. As Mr. Murshid Alam said, today we have BASE online lecture number 42, and the topic is which face mask to wear against patriarchy. I feel honored to introduce our guest for today's session, Professor Niladri Chatterjee, speaker for today's lecture, and Professor Amjad Hussain, chair of the session. Professor Niladri Chatterjee is an eminent academician, widely published author, activist, as well as novelist. He teaches at the Department of English in the University of Kalyani, West Bengal. Professor Chatterjee's doctoral work was on the novelist Christopher Isherwood. He is a recipient of Fulbright Scholarship and the British Council Charles Wallace Fellowship. He co-edited the Muffled Heart Stories of the Disempowered Male contributed to the American Issuehood, and so on. He has published in the journal American Notes and Queries, Intersections, and has recently begun contributing to The Where. He has reviewed for Gay and Lesbian Review Worldwide. Other than these, he has also authored the book Androgyny and Female Impersonation in India, Nari Bhab, along with Professor Tutun Mukherjee. He has been teaching a course, New Gender Studies, at his university since 2009. In 2016, his first novel, The Scholar, came out. With these few words, I welcome you, sir, for today's program. Next, I would like to introduce Professor Amjad Hussain, who is currently Professor of English and Dean of Students' Welfare at Alia University. He completed his PhD on the poetry of Ted Hughes at IIT Kharagpur. His areas of research interest are contemporary British poetry, utopian literature, Indian writing in English, and the process of emergence of cultural modernity among the Muslims in Bengal. He has also translated into English short stories of Bangla Dalit and Muslim women authors. With these few words, we welcome you, sir. I also want to express that BASE is indeed honored to have both of you here for the program. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Now I would request Professor Amjad Hussain, sir, to start today's session. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Samia, and good evening to everybody. I would like to welcome all of you to today's talk to be delivered by Professor Niladri Chatterjee.
স্যার আপনি আনমিউট করুন, কেউ মিউট করে দিয়েছে।
Sorry. Well, good evening. I would like to welcome all of you to today's session. Our speaker today is Professor Niladri Chatterjee. As you know, he's not only a sound scholar, but also a great speaker, sort of mesmerizing sort of speaker. So I think you will enjoy this session. He will speak, as it was announced already, which face mask to wear against patriarchy. Now, patriarchy, as you all know, has been given a new meaning in feminism. It means a kind of overarching structure or system that oppresses, dominates, and exploits women. But nowadays, it is not only, men who are patriarchy, which oppress or dominates or exploits women, but also it dominates people with different sexual orientation, like the LGBTI community. Dr. Chatterjee specializes in this area of study. So I hope you will all, it will be a very profitable session for all of us. Thank you, and over to Professor Chatterjee. Over to Professor Chatterjee. Professor Chatterjee, now you can start.
Yes.
You have to unmute
Thank you so
also.
much, Professor Hussain, for those very kind words of introduction. Thanks also to BASE for very, very kindly inviting me to speak on this forum. I have been asked to speak by a very dear friend of mine who also happens to be doing his doctoral thesis under my supervision, Hassan, and I'm very pleased to be here today to be able to speak to all of you. But before I begin, I think I cannot start without mentioning the very sad news that the former president of our country, Pranab Mukherjee, is no longer with us. So if I have the permission of Professor Hussain, could we have perhaps a minute's silence? Is that allowed? So could we have a moment silence? Could we have a minute silence for
Yes, yes, sir.
yeah. So maybe we can just have a minute silence, after which I shall begin. Thank you. So when I was asked to present, I was clearly going to talk about patriarchy, and I felt that there has to be a way of presenting patriarchy in a way in which we perhaps would be able to understand the way in which patriarchy works. And I have spoken about it at several other seminars on which I have said that patriarchy is a constantly mutating drug-resistant virus. I have said that very, very often, and I have also constantly said that because this is a constantly mutating drug-resistant virus, which means that patriarchy is never entirely always the same. Patriarchy constantly changes its appearance. Patriarchy constantly becomes something that you didn't expect it to be. So therefore, patriarchy is sort of like a chameleon. So that, I think, is something which we really perhaps need to understand. So therefore, the question arises that if patriarchy is a constantly mutating drug-resistant virus, and we have to clearly guard against it, how do we guard against it? So therefore, that is why I decided to use the metaphor of the face mask, because I felt that the face mask is a rather useful metaphor in many ways, and I'll tell you exactly why I thought the face mask metaphor was productive. You see, initially, you remember in the early days of the virus, around March or around April, when there was talk about, what we should wear face masks, there was a certain kind of confusion as to who was expected to wear the face mask and who was not expected to wear the face mask. So there were some people who were saying that if you didn't have the virus, there was no need for you to wear the face mask. You had to wear the face mask only if you had the virus. So that was one of the things that was told to us initially in the early days of the virus. But of course, since then we've learned that whether we have the virus or whether we don't have the virus, everybody should wear the face mask. And I would actually want to use that idea that you should wear the face mask only if you have the virus, to actually activate what I'm going to say over here, which is to say that we should all wear the face mask against patriarchy, because of the very simple reason that we all, every single one of us, does carry the virus of patriarchy. Yes, every one of us. So therefore, including me. So we all have patriarchy in our bloodstream. We all have the patriarchy in our consciousness. And so therefore, we will have to try to find ways to prevent it from spreading any more than it already has. And to ensure that the germ of patriarchy that we carry within ourselves is not increased through further contamination with more patriarchy. So therefore, that I think is something that we really need to keep in mind, is that we will have to prevent other people from getting infected with the patriarchy that we have within ourselves. And we should also prevent ways in which other people's patriarchy don't infect us. So when I'm actually using the idea of the face mask, I think that the idea of the face mask is actually rather important, because of the very simple reason that you know very well, that the idea is that the coronavirus is actually spread through little droplets of moisture that escapes our mouth when we are talking. And I am actually going to use the idea of talking being potentially harmful to basically structure my talk today. So I'll talk about the way in which talking can sometimes be harmful. Now, many of you who have heard my lectures before will know that I'm very often in the habit of saying that silence is patriarchal and speech is feminist. I have said that on many, many occasions, and I continue to say that silence is patriarchal and speech is feminist. But for this particular occasion, I shall actually say that I am going to talk about the way in which sometimes speech can also be patriarchal. So I'll talk about the way in which even speaking sometimes helps patriarchy. So therefore, what is patriarchal talk? What exactly is patriarchal talk? And how can you stop yourself from speaking patriarchally? And also, how can you prevent other people's patriarchal talk from increasing the amount of patriarchal virus that you already carry within you? So therefore, I'll talk about the way in which speaking can help patriarchy. So I will also therefore talk primarily about how language is therefore patriarchal. So if language becomes patriarchal, then I think it becomes very easy for us to understand exactly what is going on. Because as many of you here will already be aware, that our identities, we as people, are constructed through words. So if you take away words, we no longer exist. I mean, we exist as physical beings, but our physical being therefore has no social validity, it has no legal validity, it has no constitutional validity. All of these validities are tied to the way in which our identities are literal. And the way in which our identities are literal actually begins with the birth certificate. So the moment we get the birth certificate, the moment a certificate is given to us, which is a piece of paper with writing on it, at that very moment, our identities become literal. And once they become literal, they never stop being literal, as you can imagine, because certificates continue to be produced in our name even after we die. Yes, so even certificates that are produced by our children, by our grandchildren, they will still continue to reproduce us endlessly using words. Words such as address, words such as name. But I think the most important marker of identity over here is basically that of gender. And that is where I think the whole literalization of the identity begins. And obviously, anybody who has heard me will know where I'm going with this, that obviously imputation of gender is in itself a patriarchal act. Now, I am tired of saying this at every single webinar where I speak at, but I think that it is still my duty to continue to say this, because I am quite disturbed that even after all these years, there still seems to be a very, very tenacious idea amongst people who speak on gender or who speak on feminism to say that sex is biological and gender is social. I am very tired of hearing this, but I will again use this platform to reinforce the message that there is no such a thing as a biological sex. I have said it many, many times, and I will continue to say this here, because I understand that while there are others who are listening to me who have heard me many, many times before, but I am particularly addressing all the new participants who have probably never heard me before. So this is for those who are hearing me today for the first time, that this is what it is. Biological sex doesn't exist. So therefore, even before we apply gender to a newborn baby, we apply sex. Yes? So the first thing that we tell our relatives when they are delighted that a child has been born in the family, the first thing that we tell them is whether the child is male or female. Nobody is particularly interested to know whether the child is healthy or not, but the only thing that people seem to be interested in is that whether the child has a vagina or whether the child has a penis. So therefore, we are actually giving the child a sex. We are creating a sex and we are applying it to the child. And by doing it, we are automatically making the child's life difficult. But that is something that we don't understand. We don't understand that how attributing sex to the child and then to subsequently attribute gender to the child is actually causing the child an enormous amount of harm. But that is something that we just don't seem to understand. Now, for those of us who actually still believe that biological sex exists, because some of us still seem to labor under the illusion that the penis is a male sexual organ and the vagina is a female sexual organ, I will very quickly say that that is not the case, because if we look at the trans woman who has not had surgery done to her lower part of the body, the trans woman is going to gender present as a woman. She is going to claim the identity of a woman for herself, but she can also have a penis. So if a trans woman has a penis, then that penis, as you very well know, does not remain a male sexual organ anymore. Similarly, if a trans man undergoes gender reassignment surgery, and if the trans man therefore looks like a man, because after getting hormonal injections, trans men can actually have facial hair, they can do some workout, they can have big muscles, but the trans man can choose not to do any kind of surgery on the lower part of the body. So therefore, the trans man can remain a man, but with a vagina, right? So if a man can have a vagina, and if a woman can have a vagina too, then the vagina does not remain a female sexual organ anymore. Similarly, if a natal body has a penis, yes, and if that body grows up and claims the identity of a woman, So if one kind of woman has a vagina and another kind of a woman has a penis, then therefore the penis, one kind of woman has a penis and another kind of woman doesn't. So therefore penis does not remain a male sexual organ anymore. So what we are actually looking at therefore is we need to therefore understand that biological sex is very much a construct. Biological sex is a construct that is used as the base on which gender is created. So that, I think, is something that we really understand. We really have to understand. Is biological sex doesn't exist. It is a foundationalist fable. What is a fable? A fable is a story that has got no, no base in reality, right? So in a similar way, sex is therefore a foundationalist fable. It does not have any kind of base in reality. And it is that completely fictitious base. It is a completely fictional base on which we create gender. So therefore, sex is not biological. Sex is as much socially constructed as gender is. So I just thought that that is something that I had to put on the table right at the beginning. We therefore go on to understand how the subsequent construction of identity begins to happen. Because once we start to construct the sex, then the gender becomes very easy to apply. Then after gender, sexuality becomes very easy to apply. So then sex, gender, desire, they are all made to appear as being a part of one and the same structure, which it is, because they are all socially constructed. Desire in itself is not socially constructed, but heterosexuality certainly is very, very carefully socially constructed. So what we really have to therefore understand is that there is no difference between biological sex and gender. There is no difference between biological sex and gender. Gender is fictive, just as biological sex is fictive. And on the basis of the sex and the gender, heterosexuality is created. And it is this creation of heterosexuality which necessitates the creation of sex. That is what we really have to understand. So the patriarchal project is ultimately to consolidate heterosexuality. And in order to consolidate heterosexuality, patriarchy creates gender. And in order to give gender some kind of a material base, it creates sex. But sex is also fictive. Sex is also fictional. So that is really what we have to understand. Now, I am going to go on to talk about the other ways in which speech becomes patriarchal. And speech becomes patriarchal right from the time when our parents start to take care of our upbringing. So what really happens is that our parents take great deal of care to ensure that we grow up along patriarchally specified gender binarist lines. This is something that you already know, so I'm not going to give you any more examples on that. Everybody knows these examples, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But what we really have to understand, therefore, is that we are, when our parents say that they love us, what they are actually doing is that through their love, they are trying to discipline our identity. Now, disciplining in itself may not be patriarchal, because without discipline, society would, we would all kill each other and all of that. So therefore, discipline, law and order, I've got no problem with that. But what we really have to understand is that, is there any logic behind the disciplining of gender? Is there any logic behind the disciplining of sexuality, sexual desire? So that is when it becomes very clear that patriarchy is not simply interested in maintaining law and order. Every time I speak at some seminar or the other, there will be somebody who is going to come and tell me, sir, you seem to talk against patriarchy, but sir, without patriarchy, the society would collapse. No, please don't worry. Without society, without patriarchy, society will not collapse. If anything, society is going to be a much happier place, because of the very simple reason that patriarchy controls what it need not. That is something that we really should be careful about. Patriarchy controls what it need not. There is no need to police gender. There is no need to police sexuality. But that is something that patriarchy does repeatedly. Why? And much more importantly, because we are talking about speech, face mask, what are we saying that is patriarchal? So what we really then have to understand is that what exactly is speech becoming patriarchal? So speech becomes patriarchal when you ask certain questions. And these questions can be very, very innocuous. They can be very, very sort of almost loving, almost harmless. So whenever you meet somebody and you sort of say, oh, yes, you know, especially if you meet somebody like me of my age, many people have very often come up to me and they have said, oh, Mr. Chatterjee, or oh, Dr. Chatterjee, you know, the next time you visit, you know, you should bring your wife. So then I tell them that, you know, it would be lovely. I would be very happy to bring my wife if I had one. To which they would be absolutely horrified. And you know, let me tell you this, you know, there are very few pleasures left in life at the moment. Very few pleasures left in life. But one of those few pleasures left in life is the expression of horror that I see on people's faces when I tell them that I'm not married. The immediate question is, aren't you married? So I said, no, I'm not married. Why not? And that is where I think a face mask becomes essential. Before you pronounce that question, why not, put on the face mask. Because if you put on the face mask, you will not get to ask that incredibly nonsensical question. I don't understand why people ask me why I'm not married, as if marriage is like, you know, breathing oxygen or eating food. Why don't you eat is a perfectly logical question. Why don't you drink water is a perfectly logical question. Why don't you breathe in oxygen is a perfectly logical question. Why aren't you married is not a question that strikes me as being particularly necessary for a happy human life, right? So say, for example, you are one of the lucky people who have got married. And then, of course, you would think that once you've got married, this is where patriarchy is going to put on the face mask and not ask you any more questions, right? Wrong. Because just after you've got married, patriarchy will have the next question, which is already there. When are we getting the good news? And you think, well, good news, do you mean when are we booking our new flat? No. Do you mean when are we getting our PhD degree? No. What is the good news that you want? The good news that they want is, when are you contributing to the global pollution by adding one more human being who is going to contribute to the carbon footprint? It's so sweet. So sweet. Because we have not damaged the environment enough, let us damage it some more. We haven't produced enough rubbish. You must contribute children to this society so that they can produce rubbish themselves. Why haven't you contributed to the overall contribution or generation of garbage? Right? It is sweet. So what really interests me is that when patriarchy asks these questions, what they actually should have done is, won the face mask. Wear the face mask. Because if they had won the face mask, then that question wouldn't have come out, and the sum total of patriarchy in society wouldn't have increased. But here is the problem. They don't wear the face mask. And that is where it becomes terribly, terribly difficult. What I would also want to put forward is that there are ways in which we constantly try to make sure that everybody remains normative. And it is our desire that everybody must remain normative. And the way in which we produce the normativity is by asking questions that we don't realize are hegemonic, but we ask those questions all the time. So say, for example, if I'm a Bengali, and if I say that I do not like Rasgulla, the question is going to be, why not? Right? So if I'm a Bengali who is not a great fan of Tagore, the question is going to be, why not? And it is the why not which fascinates me. Because what is really going on there is that the assumption behind that question is that I want you to be a normative Bengali. Just as I would want you to be a normative man, a normative woman, a normative heterosexual. So therefore, that is why we should constantly make sure that everybody is kept normative. You are a Bengali, you must like Rasgulla. You are a Bengali, you must like Tagore. You are a Bengali, you must like either East Bengal or Mohun Bagan. Yes? I have very often been made aware of my inadequate masculinity because of the very simple reason that every time there's a cricket match, invariably there will be somebody on the train or on the bus who is going to ask me the score. And my usual reply is, what score? So again, shock of horror. Oh my God, which planet are you on? Don't you know there's a cricket match going on? Because of course, the most important thing that can happen in life is of course a cricket match. So I say, no, I'm sorry, yeah, I don't know. And then this look of horror. You look like somebody who has a penis. How can you have a penis and not be interested in bat and ball? Right? So therefore, it is almost as though I am genetically supposed to like cricket. It is almost as though cricket is a part of the XY chromosome. Because you see, scientific research will find very, very soon that when XY chromosome develops, coded within that XY chromosome is cricket and football. And the XX chromosome, scientific research will show very soon that if you have the XX chromosome, then it is going to mean that you will love watching the Hindi serials. Apparently, it is genetically coded. So there is a way in which we constantly try to speak or ask questions that are patriarchal. But this is where we get it wrong. We don't understand it. And this is something that I have come across even when I have met people who teach at very prestigious universities in India. So therefore, what does patriarchy do? Patriarchy assumes, so I am going to look at you and I'm going to automatically assume everything about you. Yes? I'm going to assume your gender. I'm going to assume your sexuality. I'm going to assume your social class. I'm going to assume what books you've read. I'm going to assume what brand of chocolate you like. Patriarchy assumes. So when we ask a question, what we really need to ask ourselves is that question not being driven by any kind of assumption? Because very often to assume is to be patriarchal. What patriarchy also does is that it stabilizes your identity. Patriarchy is very, very disturbed by change, except for change of clothes, which is the one thing that patriarchy will very often encourage. So patriarchy is very disturbed by change. Now, there are some changes that patriarchy is perfectly willing to encourage. Change of your marital status from single to double. Yes, patriarchy may sometimes also celebrate from double to back to single. Patriarchy may also have a bit of a fun when you put up your relationship status as it's complicated. Patriarchy will like all of that. Patriarchy is also going to be very happy with your change of job. Patriarchy may sometimes encourage change of nationality. Patriarchy may sometimes encourage or be okay with change of religion. But somehow patriarchy is very, very uncomfortable with the change of gender, which is why trans persons today continue to have such a difficult time. It is such a difficult time because they are constantly asked, why change? Why are you changing? Why is change necessary? And these patriarchal questions come from the assumption that once we have dumped an identity on you at birth, you should stick to that identity till you die. Right? So therefore, can we begin to understand patriarchy as a kind of branding mechanism? Yeah, branding. Not branding in the sense of Levi's jeans or sort of, Calvin Klein, but branding in the sense that you brand cattle, branding in the sense that you brand a cow. Yeah, it is a mark that you are supposed to carry on your body for as long as you live. Patriarchy brands you. And the two brands that patriarchy imprints on you, right, at the time of your birth, one is sex and the other is gender, immediately. So there is a kind of branding mechanism that patriarchy enforces, and patriarchy takes the branding process so seriously, not the branding process, but the act of branding so seriously, that if anybody chooses to change that, patriarchy is horrified. It disturbs me. It saddens me that now in 2020, I am shocked to find that there are some people who call themselves feminism, those who call themselves feminist, they are also not allowing trans persons to claim their identity. They are feminists. So whether you have J.K. Rowling, or whether you have Germaine Greer, or whether you have Sheila Jeffries, or whether you have many, many other feminists who are today up in arms because they refuse to accept trans women as women. What these feminists don't understand is when they are refusing to accept trans women as women, because in their head they are thinking that a trans woman is still somebody who is a man with a penis. Do you realize what they're doing? They are doing exactly what patriarchy does. They are saying that your natal identity is the only identity that we will recognize. This is something that Jordan Peterson says. Jordan Peterson surely is not known for his feminism. But strangely enough, this is something that people like Germaine Greer also say. So in a very strange way, Jordan Peterson, a rabid anti-feminist, and Germaine Greer, supposedly a feminist, they agree on one very important point, that your natal identity is your ultimate incontrovertible identity. I find that astonishingly violent, and that is something which we are having to deal with today. So you can be a feminist, but if your feminism is trans-exclusionary turf, if your feminism is trans-exclusionary, and if you are also excluding other kinds of trans bodies, then how inclusive is your feminism? I am very, very amused to note that I have so far spoken at least 3 different webinars where the subject was women and COVID-19, or gender and COVID-19, or COVID-19 and gender, or COVID-19 and women. So that, I think, is really what is interesting, is that when I have gone to speak at these webinars, which supposedly deal with women, I have found that they are actually not dealing with all women at all. They are only dealing with women who were gender assigned female at birth and who belong to the middle class and who are married and who have basically been beaten by their husbands. So in webinar after webinar after webinar, all that I hear about is domestic abuse, not domestic abuse, domestic violence. Domestic violence, domestic violence, domestic violence. Now what this does is, I am not for a moment denying the severity of the cases of domestic violence that have actually skyrocketed. And it is a very serious concern, and I'm not denigrating it, and I'm sort of, I'm not reducing its importance. But what I find really astonishing is that if the discourse becomes exclusively about domestic violence in the middle class household, then there are lots of other women who we are not recognizing at all. We are not recognizing the sex worker. We are not recognizing the trans women. We are not recognizing, the ASHA group of women. So there are so many women. We are not recognizing lesbians. So there are so many women that we are leaving out to focus exclusively only on heterosexually married women in middle-class households. That is another kind of exclusionary feminism that I find being articulated over and over again. So maybe when these seminars take place, and I'm hoping that this seminar is being recorded and it will be put up on YouTube so many people can watch it. Next time, whenever anybody organizes a seminar on women and COVID-19, can they please be very careful not to make sure that the discussion becomes exclusively about female identified at birth, married and living in a middle class. Because that kind of restricted feminism is not the kind of feminism that I have subscribed to. So maybe that is something that we need to keep in mind. I will round up my talk by also talking about the way in which these kind of patriarchal questions also seem to spill over even among those people who regard themselves as being very liberal, those who apparently do not have a problem with sexual diversity, with gender diversity. But even there, one can unconsciously find patriarchy being articulated in the questions that they ask. And one of the most common questions that are asked of gay couples or of lesbian couples is, I understand that you two are a couple and congratulations, but in your couple, who is the husband and who is the wife? So when you have that question being directed to a gay couple or a lesbian couple, what you are broadly saying is, please tell us who is the husband and who is the wife, so that we can satisfy ourselves that you are modeling yourselves on heterosexuality. So therefore heterosexuality can be the original, you can be the derivative. So therefore we were here first, you came here second. So just because we have been here first, we are therefore better. It is a remarkably patriarchal idea, the idea of primogeniture. I was born first, therefore I'm better. But for those of us who seem to labor under the illusion that heterosexuality came first and homosexuality came later, you would be interested to know that the term homosexual was actually coined first, and the term heterosexual was coined a couple of decades later. So if we really have to get into the competition of who came first, who came second, well, actually, here is the news. The homosexual was there first, the heterosexual came a few decades later. But I am not here to get into a competitive mode, because patriarchy is competitive. So I am not going to be competitive. I shall simply say that it does not really matter who came first, who came second, because Judith Butler tells us very, very clearly, don't they, that what she says is that even if a gay couple say that I am the husband and he's the wife, or if a lesbian couple says I am the husband and she's the wife, maybe those who are heteronormative, they should not celebrate that too much, because when they are saying I am the husband and she is the wife, what they are doing is they are detaching the term husband from the male body in the case of the lesbian couple, and they're detaching the word wife from the female body when we are talking about the gay couple. So therefore, this kind of detachment that happens of the term from the body, that kind of separation is wonderfully feminist. It is post-structurally feminist, because what it really does is that it then tells you that the term husband does not have a particular sex assigned to it. The term wife does not have a particular sex assigned to it either. So therefore, husband, wife become, as my friend Derrida often says, a floating signifier. And if we start to think about the husband and the wife as the floating signifier, then similarly, we can start to let terms such as male, female, man, woman float. Because once we start to float these terms, we will begin to realize that these terms actually do not have any kind of anatomical ground at all. There is no anatomical ground. The anatomical ground that we assume for terms such as male, female, man, woman, husband, wife, these are not grounds at all. They have simply been applied, and we continue to use them as if we were born with those terms. But no, we were not born with those terms. Those terms were actually given to us. So to round up this discussion as to how are we to use the face mask, and what kind of face mask should we use against patriarchy? Well, to sum up, the face mask that we should try to use from now on is the face mask that prevents us from asking questions that are based on our assumption of people's identities depending on what they look like, what they sound like, what they wear, the way they walk, the way they talk. So we should not ask questions which are based on these assumptions. We should also not ask questions that assume that being a couple is a norm. We should not assume that having children is a norm. I am very, very happy that now more and more and more women are becoming very, very vocal about the fact that they wish to remain child-free. Not childless, child-free. And now there is a movement based on the philosophy of antinatalism that basically says that human reproduction is an act of cruelty. So let us not go about demanding that people have children. Let us not go about demanding that people get married. Let us not go about demanding that people remain loyal to one single sexual partner. Let us not go about demanding that you should fall in love only once in your life and then that's it, you've lost your chance. If you've fallen in love once, then you shouldn't fall in love with anybody else ever again for as long as you live. Let us not make these assumptions. The less assumptions we make, the happier we will be, and who knows, one day we will be able to get rid of the face mask, because then nobody will have the virus of patriarchy in them, including ourselves. Thank you very much.
Professor Amjad Hossain.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, as usual. You are brilliant, and it's a very captivating, as I said, mesmerizing talk. So just by way of, you have already summarized your main points towards the conclusion. But I just again wish to reiterate what you have said
Yes.
in the course of your talk. I mean, as you see, Professor Chatterjee, she is entitled the talk as "Which Face Mask to Wear Against Patriarchy." Now, here, of course, he has mentioned that he uses the word face mask as a kind of metaphor, and we need to wear this metaphor particularly at this time, because we have to prevent the spread of the virus of patriarchy. Because patriarchy, he mentioned as constantly mutating, drug-resisting virus. Very pictorial way of saying this. And then he usually, he wanted to make the point that at this point it seems
Sir, please unmute করুন নিজেকে মিউট করে দিয়েছি আপনাকে
Oh, sorry. Sorry, during the first part, can you listen to me or not?
Yes,
Yes,
yes. Yeah, we heard the first part.
So somehow I touched the unmute button. Okay. So yes, then he talked about how we can, prevent of other people's language being patriarchal. See, and he mentioned that our identity is constructed with words, because words are the most important marker of our identity. And then he went on to demolish the distinction between sex and gender. As we all know, that sex is biological and gender is socially or culturally constructed. But he, explained the fact that, like gender, sex is also constructed or attributed to us. And he gave a lot of examples to make his point. And then he pointed out that not only sex, but also, you see, like gender, our desire is also socially constructed, and heterosexuality is also socially constructed. In fact, the patriarchal project is to consolidate heterosexuality. And then he said that, yes, we have a kind of love for patriarchal structure, but then when you see our parents ask us almost innocuous questions, but through those kinds of innocuous questions, actually, patriarchy is strengthened. But we have to accept the fact to understand that if patriarchy vanishes or collapses, society will not collapse, because patriarchy need not police gender and sexuality. And you see, finally, then the next point he tried to make is that, you see, patriarchy wants that everybody should remain a kind of normative man or normative woman and normative heterosexual. And in this way, patriarchy intends to stabilize our identity. Patriarchy does not encourage any change of gender. You see, patriarchy is a, as he said beautifully, that it is a kind of branding mechanism. It brands us as male or female or man or woman, and brands are inflicted on us, particularly the brand of sex and gender. And then he often, as he experienced on various occasions, that feminism talks about, particularly nowadays when they are discussing about domestic violence, he thinks that this is a kind of exclusionary feminism, because that feminism, talking about only or emphasizing domestic violence, assumes that, the suffering of the heterosexual middle-class married woman as it matters. But that kind of feminism excludes many other, say, sections of the society, like women, like sex workers, lesbians, etc. So we have to accept diversity, and patriarchy does not prefer sexual diversity. Patriarchy always tries to impose, even when they meet a gay couple or a less couple, our models of heterosexuality, asking the question who is the husband or who is the wife. But as Judith Butler has said, asking this type of question also in a way helps in the detachment of these terms from the body. Husband or wife does not depend on the body they have. And he quotes Derrida to emphasize the fact that these terms like husband, wife, or male, female, etc., they are all floating signifiers. And therefore, we should, yes, under the circumstances, present circumstances, we should try to wear a kind of face masks which will prevent us from asking questions based on assumptions of normativity, particularly normative heterosexuality, and if we are free from these kinds of assumptions, well, the society will be a happy place. We will be happier persons. One day then will come when we don't need to wear the face mask to prevent the virus of patriarchy. Well, now I think there are lots of questions in the chat box, so I think we can proceed to the Q&A session for some time. How long can you continue, Hassan?
Uh,
Half an hour?
So we can, I think we can take 10 questions, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, okay. Sir, how would you make a distinction between patriarchy and masculinity? Who wear the face mask? Similar question আরেকটা আছে. Yes. What is the relationship between gender, sexuality, and patriarchy? Yes, sir.
I think the second question is a 35 mark question for an annual exam. So maybe that is something which will take another half an hour to explain, and I think that is what I have been speaking about so far. So I think if they have listened carefully, they would have been able to get the answer themselves. What was the first question, Hassan?
Yes.
What was the first question? What was the first question, Hassan?
Yes. Sir, how would you make a distinction between patriarchy and masculinity?
I make no distinction, because masculinity and femininity are also produced by patriarchy. It is patriarchy who creates these gender presentations. But what I can say is that sometimes masculinity can be performed in a way which subverts patriarchy, and femininity can also be performed in a way that subverts patriarchy. But masculinity and femininity are patriarchal constructs. So I don't see much difference between the two at all. Yeah.
Okay, next question by Chompa Ghoshal. Why should you differentiate between a lesbian and a gay? Why should there be gender differentiation?
That's a very good point. I have used the terms lesbian and gay in order to respect the identities of those who identify themselves as gay and those who identify themselves as lesbian. Because if I did not do that, then I would be doing this horribly patriarchal act of then saying, oh, the categories that you claim for yourself, I don't respect the categories that you claim for yourself. I am going to ignore them. So when I use the term lesbian or when I use the term gay, I am actually being respectful of the categories that people claim when they say that they are gay, when they say that they are lesbian. So it is a respectful act. Yeah.
Okay, there is a question from Sheikh Abid Hassan. So Abid, unmute yourself and please ask. Okay, the question is, how can we counter Brahmin Homonastronism? Can queer Muslim and queer Sikh using religious texts to broach the subject defeat this narrative?
Yes, absolutely. That is my short. That is my short answer. Sorry. Yes, of course. I think Brahmin homonationalism is something which is it's become again it's become another virus, and it needs to be countered from every direction. So not only from people of other religions, but also from within the Hindu community. For example, people like me, who are going to say that there must be a distinction between being a Hindu and subscribing to Hindutva. So I think, just as I am opposed to homonationalism, I think the attack or the challenge to homonationalism should come from various quarters. And certainly using religious texts from other religions, and not only religious texts from other religions, but also religious texts from Hinduism itself can be used to counter the toxic discourse of Brahmin homonationalism. So yes, it can be done and it should be done.
Okay, there is a question from Shaumadip Sarkar. In India,
Yes.
everything happens just to get married. Such example, study well, you will get a good wife. Sir, what do you think about this? Is it patriarchal?
Short answer, yes. Next question. Yes, it's completely patriarchal. I'll have the next question.
Okay. So, what about those trans people who choose to undergo surgery to uh, align their sex according to the gender I think their identity with? Are they then confronting to the notion of sex as a biological construct?
Okay, I don't think the person actually meant to write confronting. I think the person probably meant to write conforming. So conforming to sex as a biological construct. Very good question. But my answer will be no, in the sense that, you see, it becomes very interesting. Even when a trans person, say for example, take the example of a trans woman. So even if a trans woman undergoes full gender reassignment surgery, so she has breasts, right, and she has vaginoplasty, so she has the doctor can build a vagina. Even after that, it does not mean that they're conforming to a certain biological sex, because of the very simple reason that the whole assumption of a biological sex is that the vagina indicates the presence of a womb and a uterus. And the womb and the uterus is something that the trans woman will never have. Similarly, if a trans man decides to build himself a penis, he can do that. He can certainly have a penis, but the penis is supposed to be that genital through which sperm is transmitted, but a trans man cannot produce sperm. So therefore, even after a trans woman or a trans man has undergone so-called complete gender reassignment surgery, they will never be able to conform to the patriarchal notion of the biological sex, right? So therefore, and also the term biological sex means a sex that you are born with. So after you have actually undergone surgery, technically, it isn't biological sex anymore. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. Next question.
Okay, next question by Paulomi Bhattacharya. Sir, do you think the idea of marital loyalty is patriarchal?
Oh my God, you're going to get me into trouble. I Well, I just personally feel that the idea of marriage in itself is patriarchal, because what marriage basically does is, and this is something which a lot of feminists unconsciously don't realize. So many feminists are certainly going to say, oh, objectification is a bad thing, right? Everybody agrees with this. Objectification, very bad. But what they don't understand is that when two people are getting married, they are precisely doing that to each other. They are objectifying each other. The husband has objectified the wife. The wife has become the object, the property of the husband. And sometimes the wife can claim the husband as her property. So there is a kind of mutual objectification that happens in marriage. So therefore, marriage is a structure that dehumanizes the parties involved in it, which is why marriage in itself is a patriarchal institution, because patriarchy dehumanizes everybody in it.
Okay, next question from Sheikh Abid Hassan. Would you say Bengali language has been gendered due to interference of Brahmins? And again, another question from Sayan Guha. Is matriarchy a vaccine to patriarchy? Your view, sir?
Sorry, I didn't get the next one.
Is matriarchy a vaccine
Oh,
to patriarchy?
Right. Right. So matriarchy is still patriarchy. Let's just get that out of the way. Matriarchy is not the corrective to patriarchy. Matriarchy is simply patriarchy in drag, in a woman's dress. So therefore, there is no difference between matriarchy and patriarchy, because both these systems consolidate gender inequality, right? So therefore, matriarchy is not the vaccine to patriarchy. Feminism is the vaccine to patriarchy. And feminism will never support matriarchy. Never, ever. That is the first point. And as far as the question regarding language, I frankly do not know. I haven't studied Bengali in great detail, so I simply wouldn't be able to know. But I'm sure that the Brahminical influence in Bengali is very, very powerful. I'm sure that is the case. But I also believe that Bengali has also been cross-fertilized, and it has also been kind of influenced by other languages as well. But sure, I mean, there may be powerful influences which should be identified. So yeah.
Okay, next question. Sir, will patriarchy ever end? Because, as you said, the speech that we use is itself corrupt with the virus of patriarchy.
No, I think that I am not going to completely dismiss speech entirely. I believe that there is also feminist speech. There is feminist discourse. So there is a way in which one can speak and be feminist. There is a way in which one can speak against patriarchy. So no, I think that we can continue to talk, but there are ways in which we can talk that do not help patriarchy. So yes, I am optimistic that patriarchy can be, well, if not defeated, then certainly reduced. And we can do that by very consciously using the language that we do. Next question.
Okay, I think Anupam Devnath has posted some questions. So, Anupam Devnath ki request hoga, please unmute yourself and ask your question. আমরা আর একটা কোশ্চেন নেব, লাস্ট কোশ্চেন অনুপম দেবনাথের পরে।
Okay. Yes. So Anupam, what's your question?
Yes.
I can't hear the question.
Okay, sir. I'm asking, in 21st century, postmodernism has emerged as a reaction to postmodernism. How do you see the position of feminists getting reset by it?
I'm sorry, in 21st century, postmodernism has emerged in reaction to postmodernism.
In 21st century, postmodernism
Hmm.
has emerged as a reaction to postmodernism. How do you
Postmodernism has emerged as a sorry. Postmodernism has emerged as a reaction to postmodernism.
postmodernism has emerged
Huh?
as a reaction to postmodernism?
Postmodernism as a reaction to postmodernism.
No, sir. তার আগে
I-
একটা পোস্ট আছে, postmodernism.
Oh, postmodernism. Oh, I see. Okay. Yes. Huh. Okay. Huh.
And how do you see the positions of feminists getting reset by it?
No, first of all, I'm not terribly sure what postmodernism is, because I believe that postmodernism still very much continues, and also I think that the equivalent to postmodernism that we find in feminism is certainly post-structuralist feminism, which concentrates on language, which concentrates on language as political, which concentrates on language or words being floating signifiers, as I have been saying, because my feminism is very strongly influenced by post-structuralist feminism. So I think that feminists have extremely well adapted to post-structuralism, and I believe that post-structuralism has also brought with it the possibility of greater intersectionality, and I think it has strengthened feminism, if anything. So I'm very happy with the latest developments in feminism that are happening. Yes.
Okay, this is last question by Vishwajit Devnath. Still we have happy with patriarchy, aren't we? The question is, if we wear mask against patriarchy, can we say that after a particular time we have to wear mask against matriarchy or something not related to patriarchy?
Yeah, well, again, I think I've already have answered the question that the answer to patriarchy is not matriarchy. So I have said it about 100 million times. So here is it for the 100 millionth and first time. Matriarchy is still patriarchy, right? In case any of you can't hear me, I'm going to say it really loudly. Matriarchy is still patriarchy. Matriarchy is not the answer to patriarchy, right? I hope you've understood that. So therefore, and no, we are not happy with patriarchy at all. Because we are not happy with patriarchy, I'm sitting over here right now talking to you. If I were happy with patriarchy, I would not be making this presentation. So I don't know who is happy with patriarchy, but I am not. So I can certainly speak for myself.
Okay, এটা লাস্ট কোশ্চেন ছিল, এবার আমি
No, well, Hassan, there is another person called Ling Shayanton. He's repeatedly, I think, is he posting a question? So if Professor Chatterjee would like to take it up.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
The question is,
What is
it's a kind of practical anxiety. How is inheritance or land and capital allocated and controlled in the absence of patriarchy constructing heterosexuality, marriage, and child pollution? Can banning marriage completely and the voluntary human extinction movement control patriarchy?
Yes, it can certainly go a very long way, because this is what scientific experiments have shown, is that if human beings stop existing, chances are patriarchy won't be there. That is something worth thinking about. Because the last time I checked, patriarchy is only found among Homo sapiens. Patriarchy is not found among the animal kingdom, right? So therefore, yes, the extinction of human beings would be a very good thing, because that would mean the end of patriarchy once and for all. And as far as the distribution of land is concerned, well, you have to ask yourself a very, very fundamental question. Whose land? Whose land? So even if you say that the land belongs to the original inhabitants of the earth, no, the land does not belong to anyone. The land does not belong to anyone. We somehow managed to put a barricade around a certain patch of land and we claim it to be ours. But do we take permission from the land to do that? No. We automatically decide that we own it. So therefore, ownership of land and the way in which land is transmitted from family to family is very much a patriarchal act. And I think, but even if we start off with the land also regarding property, and marriage is a very important way of consolidating that property. I mean, this is nothing that I'm saying. A very dear friend of mine called, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, good friends of mine. They have written about it about a couple of 100 years ago. So I'm in touch with them, and they have asked me to tell you this, that even in their book, they have talked about the fact that marriage is basically a patriarchal strategy for the smooth transmission of private property. So it's not what I'm saying. Everybody knows it. Thank you.
Okay, so again, it's a privilege and great pleasure to listen to Professor Niladri Shekhar Chatterjee. I think on behalf of BASE, we extend our heartfelt thanks that he agreed to talk on this platform, and he devoted so much time and patiently answered all the questions with a smiling face. So thank you, sir. And
thank you.
Is there any other kind of formalities like?
Yes, sir. So now I would request Professor Nargis Ahmed, the Professor, Department of Nursing, Alia University, to deliver the formal vote of thanks. So, Professor Nargis Ahmed, over to you.
Thank you, Hassan Bhai. Assalamu alaikum, namaskar, and good evening to all of you once again present here, our guests, delegates, and BASE members and all. First of all, I must thank BASE for providing me the opportunity to deliver vote of thanks today. On behalf of BASE, Bengali Academia for Social Empowerment, I convey my sincere and heartfelt thanks to our today's esteemed speaker, Professor Niladri Ranjan Chatterjee from University of Kalyani, for his excellent speech on the topic, very interesting topic, which face mask to wear against patriarchy. So thank you so much, sir. We are really privileged and happy to get you here with us. And thank you so much for your wonderful and brilliant deliberation today. Yes, sir, to some extent, we have to change our mindset. The time has come. We need to free our mind and absolutely wear a face mask whenever required. So thank you so much once again. I must say that for your third eye-opening deliberation and enriched lecture. Thank you so much, sir. I convey my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Amjad Hussain, Department of English and Dean of Students Affairs, Alia University, for chairing today's session so well. Thank you so much, sir, for your kind consideration to coordinate today's lecture. I must thank BASE President, Vice President, GS, and all members, especially the team who is working hard and extending their constant and sincere effort to organize the BASE lecture series happening successfully. Last but not the least, I must appreciate and thank our beautiful audience who were constantly there with us and showed their interest in different base lectures. Thank you, dear audience, for your overwhelming response for today's lecture also. It is a matter of encouragement and motivation for us. So thank you so much once again, everybody. Please do not miss our next lecture series that will be circulating shortly. So thank you all once again. Have a great evening. Thank you.